diocesan convention in the fall. And when they get shifted from being a parish to a mission, it means that they are no longer a parish and that they don't have a vestry or a rector. It means they have a bishop's council and that they have a vicar. So St. Andrew's also continues to exist. There's been no merger on that way. The collaborative is really thought to do a couple of things. The clergy are isolated and we're tired, quite frankly. I spend most of my time doing things that is really not the work of the priest. Some of you know I was an executive director for a nonprofit, and I was also the steward for taking care of the property. And that gets translated into when there's a bed bug infestation, like there was at Grace House, that becomes my issue. I'm not really interested in bed bugs. I know how to deal with them, and I know how to move quickly on it. But that's not why I'm a priest. Being a priest is not just Sunday. Being a priest is really being a preacher and a teacher and a prophet to lead the community to do the work of the gospel, right? And it's to tend our sick and to be in the hospital. So lots of you are like, oh, I can't bother, right? I'm in the hospital. That's actually wouldn't bother me. I was Elliot four times this week, and I don't think I was as happy as being out of the building and tending to people. Now, I wasn't happy that some of our folks were sick, but being out in the community is what I want to do. So a lot of the clergy are feeling isolated. We're feeling like we're spending more and more time taking care of our buildings and taking care of the internal dynamics of parishes. Many of those internal dynamics have gone on for generations. And we want to be about the work of the mission of Christ and the mission of the church. So this is a way to free up and be more strategic about that work. The second is things are changing really, really quickly, right? Some of us before COVID knew that we were in a bit of trouble, right? We were seeing less people show up for church. It's getting harder and harder to have people serve in the choir, harder and harder to have people on vestry. We're changing. Now, as a priest, I hold some radical views. One of the radical views I hold is that the church really looks like the 1950s. We pretend it looks like the 1520s. Some of us pretend that Jesus spoke Latin. But the 1950s did some serious damage to the church. It gave us this idea that it's the norm to have 500 kids in youth program. It's the norm to have 3 and 4 clergy. It's the norm to take a cute little church and add 750 classroom spaces for people. So we have these huge facilities that came as a result of the population boom, and a lot of us keep wanting to go back, right? Keep wanting to go back to a time that we'll never see again. My mother and father, they had 5 kids. And you know, we were considered a small family. My cousins had 10, 12, and 14. Right? So in the 1950s, we're still kind of dealing with that. You look at these facilities. Go around New Hampshire, go around Manchester. You have the church, you have this giant parish hall, and then you have the addition to the parish hall. Then you have a chapel because the church was so full that you needed a worship place. And then you have a basement chapel, and we're all trying to get back there. And of course, buildings like this cost a lot of money to build. So there's this question about how do we orient ourselves to the buildings and don't let our buildings suck us in, that we don't go and take care of people. So the final bit of that is this. historic Episcopalians and Lutherans in the city of Manchester, like many other mill towns, were focused primarily on some very distinct places. The first is they were comprised of immigrants. Now, if you get to know Gethsemane, because of its immigrant identity, particularly around being Swedish, they have a culture that expresses what is often the case for a national church. So even though that has gone through first generation, second generation, third generation, there are many people when you sit down and say, how are you connected to Gethsemane? They give you this great answer. My great-grandmother and grandfather built the place. Right? That's unique. Not too unique in Manchester, right? Go to Saint-Marie, and the French Canadians have that culture too. We forget at Grace, when we were St. Michael's Parish, St. Michael's Parish was not built by the mill owners. It was built by the mill workers. In fact, the foreman to the mechanical room in the mill built and got the bishop to see to a church being built at St. Michael's. And that church that was built was a hand-hewn building that looked more like the construction of a barn than it did like this current edifice. So that would have been very, very, very particular to Grace's identity as being an immigrant church. And those folks are very much like my family, my mother's family, who came from Preston, England, and worked in the mills. So we have this deep sensitivity to immigration and to refugees and being a place of protection. That's in our DNA. And then all of us continue this work, right? We've got a great history here at Grace working with Sudanese. We have a great history working with Afghans, and many of you, as I look around this room, continue working with refugees. So that area, how do we strategically think about deepening that accompaniment work, and how do we think about that work in the current times in which we're in? Second thing that we all share, all of us, the biggest use of our facilities historically were for AA programs. The first AA programs in the state were at St. Andrews. It's a very historic place for a 12-step AA meeting. But still, if you ever go over there in the afternoon, it's very, very full. When I arrived here, there were 2 AA programs operating here on Tuesday, Thursday, and 1 on Saturday afternoon. We now have 6 days of 12-step. We brought over from Gethsemane the program that was leading there Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So 6 of our 7 days, we have programs around sobriety and 12-step. Many, many people in our pews are sober. Some talk about it and some don't. When you talk about the spiritual life and the religious life, I always say, folks going through AA, going through 12-step, they get us and we get them. So it's important for us to always be a place of sanctuary and sobriety and safety. So that made sense that that was another program area. The third program area where a lot of us have worked, look around the room, is around young house, around food insecurity, and around housing insecurity. Right? Folks, Gethsemane provided hot meals, community meal, brought that food out to the community. Grace had laundry love that used to set up across the way and provide meals and food. We have 1269. We have folks that were going over to St. Andrews. We have a deep, deep connection to being a place where we handle food, we handle housing insecurity. This is going to be a huge issue in the city. Huge issue. It's currently starting to erupt over 39 Beach Street. And every city in New England does the following. These are our people. We We don't want them here. Let's move them along. Currently, if you spend time, you see kind of a group moving to Manchester, then to Nashville, back to Manchester, back to Fitchburg. And nobody wants to deal with what they see as an intractable project. And they don't see the interconnectedness of it, right? So last week was a bad week here at Grace. I just want to get these bad, intense weeks. Shane and I were saying it may have been one of the worst weeks we've had so far. Part of that's heat. Part of that is the checks landing at the beginning of the month. Part of that is a really bad batch of drugs. Part of it is having a giant dumpster, which looks like a place where you can hide and stay away from everybody, because who would ever think people are shooting up in a dumpster? And part of that is just the movement that's going on in the city. And guess where that comes? It falls right onto the church. 38 doorbell rings last week. 38. An example of like the scariest of those, a young mother whose statement was, I'm in a camper without gas, I'm running out of food, and I'm running out of diapers. So what do you think you got to do as a priest in that, right? Two things. You got to be like Christ and be merciful, get her food and diapers. Two, you got to figure out, is this baby safe? Is this mother safe? So you're having a meeting, you got to put the meeting to the side, and you got to take care of it, right? So that's not a small interaction. And so the good news is we have a discretionary fund here, and I can get gasoline, I can get food, I can get diapers, I can connect her to the diaper lady in Manchester. There's a diaper lady who sets up and provides diapers to folks. But all of that is something that used to be handled twofold: the government and the faith community. The government has slashed the faith community's social budgets. The faith community is like, what did you do that for? And now the government is saying, can't the faith community step in here? So that's where we're at. We're working through that tension. So we have to do that work. And then the last thing is this. We are a young city. I don't know if we always appreciate it, but we're a young city. If you go down the street and hang out downtown, we have a lot of young people. It wasn't just the Art Institute. We have a lot of students still coming here. We have a lot of folks who come to our colleges. We also have a lot of folks who are starting to come into our technology fields, our engineering fields. It's still seen as a creative capital, and it's still seen as a place that's still affordable, getting more so. So how do we orient to those individuals? Many of those individuals are disenfranchised from the church. Some of those folks are highly traumatized by certain forms of Christianity that have not been supportive of them. And how do we not get out ahead of ourselves and recognize that the primary desire to be in relationship is that they have something to teach us instead of we have something to teach them? Those are the four areas of the collaborative. The collaborative has a job description. We're going to be hiring for an urban missioner, and people will be like, what is that? An urban missioner is someone who has the mission to immerse themselves in the city, to pay attention to what the needs of the city are, what the gaps are, who is equipped and able to do this work. I'm looking over here. We've had this conversation at outreach. It was one of our first outreach, right? We need someone to be able to do an evaluation and assessment and to hold relationships and then to come back to the church and say, this is what's going on. We need someone to be able to interface with nonprofits and government agencies. So the missioner is someone who's really tied into being a disciple of Jesus Christ in the city, to be a discerner of God's Holy Spirit among the people, to equip the voice of those who are often unvoiced and unheard and not seen, and to bring them back to the church. So that's what's happening. And in order to make sure that none of us, including the priests, start to want this person to work the meeting, We're keeping them out of the church buildings, and they're going to be at the YWCA. The YWCA is going to be the home of the collaborative. So, already talked too much, but that's at least something. What are questions, thoughts, hopes, worries, expectations? What are people thinking as you hear all of this?
I'd like to know, first of all, what is 1269?
Does anybody want to give that?
Soup kitchen or what?
Susan Tonner, Susan Buczynski.
Where,
Use your outside voice.
yeah, my outside. It's a place for people who are homeless, drug addicts, also, who are on drugs. It's a place where they can come and they can have a meal. So what I do is I go on Thursdays, Tuesdays, and we feed them, we serve them. And they have 4 levels in this building. It used to be the old Carrier School. Okay. So these people, they used to have a warming station in the winter. So they would come in and they can have a place to sit, place to eat, place to stay warm. They can't do the overnight because they can't afford to hire people to come in. And then on the upstairs floors, if they're doing pretty well, okay, and they've been off drugs for a few months, they can go up and they can be in one of the rooms. They have like individual rooms, and by doing that and being there, they have to come down and volunteer and help others who are there.
Do you offer services for them too, or?
They are, but that's another level.
Oh,
Then
okay.
you go up another level, okay, where there are services, if they're doing well, they have people, there's companies that will hire these people, but they have need to be off drugs for a long time, okay, and they start them out, you can't start out with a full-time job, because they don't want to work a full-time job anymore. So they may start them out with a day at a time. So that's what this particular is. It's all-inclusive, all-encompassing thing to help these people try to move. And unfortunately, being drug addicted, a lot of times these people fall off and they have to start all over again. And I think this has been one of the most rewarding things I've ever done. And working and seeing these drug addicted people as people. When I first started, I was nervous because I didn't know, I was never around people who were drug addicted. I didn't know how to talk to them. But after a while, you do. And you realize you're no different than any of you people in here who got stuck on the drug. Okay? And it's how they get to see them fall off. Because they don't volunteer in the kitchen too. They might head up some of the kitchen, and they do a great job until that moment they get that itch. But it's a great opportunity for us, right? And I'm really grateful for it.
That's wonderful.
So let's see, there are really good things. Thank you for that. So we have people there who help from the community. We also, we forget sometimes, Grace Church used to use its endowment to seed grants in the community. And I hope that that is something we're going to be able to resuscitate and do. There are reasons why I preach in certain fashions. We think our endowment needs to be of service to the community. And we gave the foundational grant to get one of those residential pods. They're like individual pods where they have their own doors, their own space, their own beds. Gethsemane has also collected items for them. So there's lots of items that are sometimes a bit harder to collect underwear. So it's amplifying the work we're doing and then also strategically trying to take those models and exert pressure and direction, because those are the models and examples that actually will get people out. We said it's a long arch, right? Addiction is a long arch, and that addictive behavior often comes because someone is abused, because someone is suffering, traumatized. So that's from 12 to 69. Yes.
So every time I hear the word mission or missioner, especially with the reading and education I've been doing most recently, my spidey sense goes up because of the history we have here in the U.S.
Yep.
Especially when we're talking about people who are overwhelmingly white and people who are not perceived as that. What's the line going to be? I mean, hearing this as an urban missioner, I wonder if there have been conversations about what this is going to, I guess maybe, I'm sure there have been conversations. I guess I would just inject into those conversations I would hope there would be that awareness and that
there's that awareness.
situationalness.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
okay.
I'd encourage you to look at the job description.
I figured it would be.
And see if the
Thanks.
job description reflects that awareness. So we have to attract people to apply for the job, and you're attracting mostly people who operate out of what I would consider to be a very pragmatic liberation theologian perspective, or a pedagogy of Paulo Freire. So that word missioner, as opposed to some of the more colonizing terms, will attract that. Whether that's the term that sticks, probably not. I don't think the term Episcopal Lutheran Collaborative will stick. So what we're trying to do
I
is...
really like that.
I know, some really hate it.
You want to look at that?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
I wrote it. I think what we're trying to do right now is not be the founding board that makes these decisions, but to hire on the actual staff person who will have to guide and live with the decisions. And equally important is to actually recruit the community members. Part of the collaborative is that we're going to have people seated on the leadership board that are actually of those communities.
Okay.
And it's really people who come from those communities that are going to have to shape out and kind of think about wording and branding and identity. So what we're trying to do is just get us in. I've got two here, so let's go here and then we'll go to
You talked about, and I've heard you say it before, that some of the administrative or building type things aren't the work of the priest. You typically work with the priest. This person isn't taking on any of these things. Is there a plan, or since you opened with that, is there a plan to ease that burden from you?
Yes, that plan is you all, plural. So part of what we have to do here is a couple of things. One, we have to continue to grow leadership and have our actual committees be empowered and do the work that they need to do. Two, we do need an additional clergy person here, which we're getting. And then three, I would like to be empowered to be able to share some of my own leadership time within the collaborative, right? So the goal would be that Reverend Sarah, while at St. Andrews and I'm here, that we would not be hiring lone rangers anymore, right? There was an extent to which when I arrived here, there really was not a practice of St. Andrews and Grace clergy meeting significantly. That was a problem, and that's been fixed. And now we will continue the practice of whoever gets hired in a collaborative, that we will begin to work with each other. And so there'll be ways in which that will come back and inform our ministry. And then there'll be ways in which we can use our facilities to empower, right? So the YWCA has some pretty big facilities. They have a big kitchen. They have actually bigger space than either St. Andrews or Grace. So we're going to be in a way of really rethinking how we do ministry in a more collaborative way. As stated, how we allow this to be community-led. The church struggles with community-led. It likes to basically build things and hope everybody comes. And that doesn't work, right? So yes, the goal, and my goal is, I will not be long for a world in which I have to keep busting up corner fights in the church. It's really not what I'm interested in. It's not what I'm gifted in. Just having gone to Rwanda, where I was offered a job to come back and teach and do spiritual formation, I have to make sure that I'm actually doing something that I think is being transformative. Dwight.
Against that wall, there's a photo of two ladies, the Warburton sisters. One was the parish administrator for about 10 million years. The other one, her sister, was a parish missionary in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. So this isn't some, new idea. This is something continuing, something we did for a long time until things changed. And now they're coming back to recognition.
So I think it's really important to recognize that the Episcopal Church and the Anglican Communion, the Church of England, is part of the Anglican Communion. Our history is, we watch all these programs on the PBS and BBC and we forget, those are Anglican nuns. They're not Roman Catholic nuns, right? They're Church of England nuns. There was a thing called the Oxford Movement. There was a thing called the Street Worker Priest. There was a thing about bringing the beauty of Gothic life to neighborhoods where people were like, we don't want it. All you gotta do is go to All Saints Dorchester. We forget All Saints Dorchester was put in All Saints, one, because there was a wealthy community on one side of the hill, but on the other side of the community was predominantly an urban community made up of African American kids who were not going to have a chance for education. There's a reason why there's a choir school there. It's a reason why those choir school children go on to some of the biggest prep schools and some of the biggest colleges. So this is in our DNA. One of the things we did here at Grace that's also in our DNA, we bought real estate and we ran houses for when kids went truant because they refused to work in the mills. You know that? Grace Church ran triple deckers, and we put mom and dads in those triple deckers, and we got those kids through one at a time, and then we would get them educated, and we would go get the next group of truant. When we started as a church, we did not have a priest. Do you know who our priest was? He was from Lowell, Father Edson. Father Edson was in Lowell. He was handpicked by the mill owners in Lowell from Harvard Divinity School. Sounds like someone who will stay well in the box. Father Edson went to Lowell. They gave him a brand new church. If you've been to St. Anne's and the Lowell Folk Festival, you know that giant church on the canal?
Yeah.
That's one of the largest Episcopal churches in New England. 16 Tiffany windows. They gave that to Father Edson and they built him a big, big mansion of a rectory. Guess what Father Edson did his first year? He ran to be president of the school committee. Guess what he did second year? These kids should not be in the mills. They got to be in mandatory school till they're 14. Then they got to be mandatory school till they're 16. Guess what the mill owners thought? Time to pray for Father Edson's demise. One of those mill owners went down the stairs during a nor'easter, slammed his head, got a hematoma on the back of his brain, was thrown into the cart. They drove him by St. Anne's. He stood up, picked his finger to Father Edson and says, "May you go to hell, you troublesome priest." And he dropped dead before he went into surgery. So these are histories. Father Edson was brought here by the mill workers to help us understand how the church can be immersed and be a solution to these situations. So there's no wokeness or radicalness or, oh my God, Ed is this and Ed is that. I'm firmly planted in the gospel of Jesus Christ.
indicated as a part of those groups that we're trying to help. Does that mean, like, some of the various groups that we meet on here will be are you going to be looking in this group for somebody in the Afghan community, for example, to be representative of that larger group?
Yes.
And same with the others. Okay, that's
So
all.
we will be coming to you to, whether or not you've known it or not, you've already, and your group has already started to indicate to me who some of those folks will be. We also have a Sudanese deacon at St. Andrews, who was a refugee to this country and now serves as a clergyman. So yes, we're going to be looking at identifying who constitutive members of those groups are to be able to bring voice and to help build that. Now, for instance, let's just take the Afghans. The folks who are working for the Afghans, they are big on just accompanying them, making sure they have driver's licenses, making sure they don't get scammed, making sure that they've got their employment assistance cards, right? It's a lot. Who's taking care of things like, you've already heard what happens with drugs. If you have post-traumatic stress disorder, you were a refugee thrown on an aircraft, put into the middle of Manchester, and you're depressed. Who helps you? How do you help somebody in a culture where you don't talk about those things? Who's best equipped to do that? An Afghan. How do you work with that? You gotta get that Afghan trained. What's the way most people come to the United States? I want to be a stock trader. I want to go make my millions in Atlantic City. We've got to do that work. That's what we can do in the collaborative. We can take what we know are the good people. I've been very impressed by some of the Afghans that I've met. They are highly educated. Many of them cross 3 and 4 languages. We've got to do a better job of thinking how do we create new Afghan-led programs. That can't fall to volunteers. That's got to be really thought through. Who runs it? How do we train folks? How do we deploy it? And you're really far behind on this, just so you all know. If you think I'm rushing because I know how far behind you are. And I know how far a lot of you folks are extended.
Are there other churches that are doing this kind of activity in Manchester, or that we're talking to any other churches?
So what I'd say is this is a really complicated question and an interesting question, right? Because we want to be ecumenical and we want to be able to bring anybody into this work who's so desirous. And so I think that is also in the quality set of the values of the collaborative. Now I'm going to say things that will be slightly mean, to which I can repent to God and eat and drink. A lot of Christians right now are not very Christian. And a lot of Christians right now, they don't want to work with a gay priest. They don't want to work with a progressive woke church. They can't stand the Episcopalians and the Lutherans, and they tell you that. All you got to do is go on Facebook and see the comments after I said we're going to be doing this wonderful thing as a church. This is what happens. Come to a real church. We're biblical. And then they put their, I won't go on and say the names. They're all about themselves, their butt in the pew, and getting things done. That's not everything. That's not everything. Second point I want to say is this. Remember how so many of you are Roman Catholics and you came to the Episcopal Church because you're like, well, this kind of makes sense. Some of you were Orthodox and you came here, it's like a middle passage. It means it's familiar. The church's teaching on divorce and birth control, quite frankly, has served the Episcopal Church quite well. Caused an extraordinary amount of pain for me. But we've been able to get a lot of folks as a result of it. And I hope we've been a place of sanctuary and a place of healing. What's going on in the evangelical church right now, they don't want you to know this. I tell you that their churches are filled to the brim? People are leaving. They don't like the alignment between the evangelical church and power. They don't like the huge amounts of scandals that have unfolded with those evangelical mega pastors. They're deeply disturbed that they go in and they're not sure if they're watching a Broadway play or if they're worshiping. Now that may not be their understanding, but the Roman Catholic Church, the Orthodox Church, and the Episcopal Church is all seeing one big trend right now. Young evangelicals are showing up to our churches. So I will work with anybody, but I often say, you know who I am, right? You're not going to be disappointed 6 months from now when I introduce you to Al. Because we should just get that discomfort over with now. But I don't see a lot of coordination here. I've been amazed at how it's one of the first places I haven't really been engaged as a clergy person by the clergy. So I take it for what it is. Yes, Leslie.
I'm just wondering, I'm familiar with an organization that has a lot of church involvement, of course. Its name is Isaiah 58. And I'm just wondering if the collaborative can maybe learn things, because Isaiah 58 has been going on a while. And from what I've learned about it, I used to work in Salem, so it sounds like we're doing some pretty good work to not only help people in a crisis, but then over the long term to build a more stable life.
So the answer is absolutely. Part of the urban missionaries' job, in addition to making sure we're using language that's not causing further problems, is to make sure that we're not creating solutions that have already been solved. So there's a whole series of the networking around best practices and working with individuals who have done this work, engaging both across the state but then also across the region and really being able to connect. It's actually one of the really interesting things about having a Lutheran and Episcopalian identity is both of those groups are already wired regionally, right? We get the synod, which is a large synod that presses into New York. We get our Episcopal diocese here in New Hampshire, which is actually part of Region 1. And so we're going to be hearing from and connecting with. We've already been invited to come to Lowell, for instance. And in Lowell, there's a whole program that's run sort of as a coffee house style. And the coffee house is placed before the 12-step meetings. So the church houses this coffee house, and within that coffee house structure, it's an extension of the 12 steps. It's a catch-all and it's a place, and they are starting to do these types of programs. Saturday evenings, if you're here, one of the new programs is an under 35 12-step. That program sometimes brings over 150 young adults at a time where they're worried about what? Where am I going to be invited tonight? What am I going to do now that I'm not working? How am I going to be in relationship with what I'm going to do? The number one request of that group, could we do worship? Right? Now, am I going to pull out the Book of Common Prayer and worship? I might. These have been adapted to 12-step. All of us, Episcopal and Lutheran, we have short, adaptive programs. Yet clergy who are in the 12-step program lead those services. So absolutely, I don't want to give any opinion that I know everything or the people who are doing this know it. That's the type of networking and building, working with community organizers and creating a synergy. We don't want to spend our time recreating models, or even worse, deploying a model that 20 other places were like, been there, done that, and did more, caused damage. Yes?
Colleges and grad schools tend to be good sources of volunteers. Is there any plan to collaborate maybe with SMU or other local colleges to find some volunteers?
Yeah, so that fourth area focused on sort of that group between 18 and 35. One of the real hopes is that we're going to actually have a presence on college campuses, and we'll be inviting college campuses. By embedding into the YWCA, one of the groups that's in the YWCA is Manchester's first LGBTQ+ resource center, which is already attracting a large amount of young adults here. So this is, again, the type of cross-pollination and immersion that we need to do. If I had a call, like a real call, that's really clear after being in Rwanda, I miss being with young adults and being with students. So I'm anxious to do that work. And I will also remind everybody that last year in Bride, we were directly in front of Hugh's contingent of about 600 young adults. They were all wondering what the priest in Apollo was doing there. They thought I didn't like that. So we have a lot of work to do there. Just as there's a movement to have evangelicals coming into the church, the largest study, the Pew study, has found that we may, through COVID, have experienced something new. The highest amount of newly baptized to those groups, Roman Catholic, Orthodox, Episcopalian, is 18 through 21. So for years we've been trending to like, I want nothing to do with the church, to maybe there's something there. So yes, we're going to have to really immerse and think about connection and think about how we build and sort of fortify those relationships. And I think as you've noticed, lots of people who won't darken worship, they'll show up to serve somebody food. So we then have to think through, if they're showing up to serve somebody food, is there ways in which we can think about building in processes of reflection and building in processes of things that feel less churchy, like night prayer. Those are all of the things that the collaborative is sort of going to be engaged in. A couple of questions before we head out. Worry? You excited?
Yes. Yes.
Yes, sir.
You know, the more I hear about this collaborative, the more excited I get. That means that we're going back to what Christ did.
Yes. Yes.
And I think it's a wonderful thing. Let's keep it up.
Amen. Anyone want to counter this work of the devil?
They're not here.
They're not here.
I think it's really exciting. I also am kind of intrigued that there's already 3 people who put themselves forward for the job and it hasn't even really hit. And I'm also excited that at the same time we're going to be bringing on a clergy person here at Grace. Right? So to have fellow ministers and to have a team really thinking through how do we take that message of Christ and deliver it, how we take of our endowments and our treasures and begin to deploy it, and how do we see things that we've done. I sometimes think we forget at Grace our history, both in the past and not that far long ago, of really seeding charitable works here and doing transformative works. I know the leaders were very intent on making sure I was there at the opening of that residential floor. And I have to tell you, it was clean, it was well thought out, and it was a place where you could go with dignity and you could hunker down your things and know something that a lot of the folks that I deal with right now in our backyard don't know. You see me, you care for me, you tell me I'm beloved, and I've never heard that before. That's the pivot point for most people's sobriety. They're drinking and drugging because they don't think they're worthy. They don't think that they're valuable. They feel that they're unseen, and they don't have any belovedness. That's what the church can do. Another quick thing, and I'll leave you all alone. Talked about this. Think of the church in its images. Sticking your hand in holy water, lighting a candle, seeing an icon, seeing a statue, getting ashes, coming out with pounds, right? Our religion is supposed to be dirty and messy. We're going to baptize a baby, right? What do? We take a dinky little container and make the oil. We should be pouring oil all over this week. You know the other thing a lot of us have talked about? Just having small reminders for people of God's remembrances. Hey Father, do you have a prayer room? Hey Father, do you have a stone? Hey Father, do you know that I carry stones around with me during the week? And I give people stones, just a simple cross. 7 months, everything in that person's life is gone, and they go in and they pull out that stone. We should be doing that as church. Simple stuff. Can you imagine creating a litany, a small little book? We all grew up with these small books as kids, didn't we? A litany with beautiful art, with the prayers that speak to people in different languages. You just say to them, here. So that's the world. And I'm telling you, I've seen it here. I've seen, and I know you've seen. Some of this is not intractable. Some of this is just showing up and telling people, I love you. I'm worried about you. Where are you? Showing up when you show up all the time and someone's in the kitchen without food because they started to do the thing that they know that they're not supposed to do. And then they come back and saying, I missed you. I'm glad you're here.
Is this person going to have at least some rudimentary Spanish?
We'd love to have somebody with rudimentary Spanish or additional language skills. I think what we're really committed to, what I'm committed to, is getting on a Spanish missioner. I've identified somebody who would be incredible at that role. The question is how we're going to be able to recruit them. But yes, we need someone here to interface. I speak Portuguese, Jean, Jean in conference speaks Creole, and we have a need for Spanish, and we also have a need, quite frankly, to be able to move across some of the African languages and then the Afghan languages. We have people in the Afghan community who speak 3 languages. Their English is impeccable. So, yes, how we're going to do that, I don't know. If a person arrives with that on their resume, that's a pretty strong candidate. But all of these types of sensitivities of understanding of who you are, if someone shows up as an immigrant, belongs in one of these places more. So, yes. I don't think we're going to have trouble finding anybody. I think we're going to have trouble deciding who wants to do this type of work in this city. And sometimes we forget that. People are so mean about Manchester. It drives me bad. Part of it drives me bad because I think, God, what would they think of me if they knew where I came from, right? I love this city. love this city, and people like this city. And so having people commit to it and creating stability in it is really important. I'm preaching again. I already had that at like 8 and 10, so I'll still all day. Just want to thank you for keeping on showing up at these, particularly on Sundays, being curious, being excited, being passionate. We are doing really interesting things together. We have to cleave to one another, because some of it's going to be scary, and some of it's going to be hard. God is here. I feel God. Be well, everyone.
Father, can I close with
Thank you,
prayer?
Father. Yes, close with prayer.
Okay.
I love defense.
Heavenly Father, in you we live and move and have our being. We thank you for this day, and we thank you for this meeting where we can talk about our hopes and dreams, and we feel your spirit. Give us your will to do your work. Use our hands and our feet to be Christ's hands and feet in this world. And give us the strength and courage to listen to that love and to step out in courage to do your work. Amen. Amen. Go in peace to love and serve the Lord.